Welcome to the LA Business Podcast, a forum for business owners and senior executives to share the experiences about the elements that drive their success. Your host is Robert Brill, CEO of BrillMedia.co.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the LA Business Podcast. Today our guest is Sean Foote, Director of Digital Marketing at Wilton Brands. Thanks for being with us today, Sean.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
So you're a CPG brand, you sell baking products. Tell us a little bit about Wilton and what you guys do.
Sure. So the foundation for Wilton actually is in creativity. It's a 90-year-old American brand, like you mentioned, CPG focused retail. Really honed in on creativity and inspiring creativity in everyone, everywhere, every day is kind of our motto. And I lead the digital charge there. All of the owned, earned, and paid media. I kind of facilitate all of that and make sure that, it's in support of growth of the brand.
So when I look at your LinkedIn profile, I see Google and a number of other really fine establishments. Tell me a little bit about your career and how you got to Wilton.
Sure. So it's been a wild ride. I'll kind of go way back. I actually started on the brand side. So I started more as a creative. I have a big design background. I was a creative director for a while, and just naturally transitioned through operations to marketing. So I was a really early adopter on inbound marketing and content focused marketing, and really again that kind of educational focused SEO laden marketing strategy, and that just progressed into media, and now it's the holistic kind of full-fledged media. I'd say like growth marketing is kind of the term that a lot of people throw around these days. But that's really what I drive for Wilton.
Tell us about what growth marketing is, because I've heard that term and I don't use it very much. It's not a common phrase in the way I talk.
Sure. So it's really about, for me, I think some people would probably give you a different perspective. I mean, depending on how it is applied in their organization. But for me, it is full funnel marketing. So where you're looking at, and if I get too jargony here, please, like don't hesitate to jump in and ask me like more specific questions. But if you're looking at, I know a lot of people are familiar with like the sales funnel, right? The marketing funnel lays right over that. And the top of the funnel, which is the widest, is awareness, right? The middle of the funnel is consideration, and the bottom of the funnel, where people really make their decision to purchase, is conversion, right? And growth marketing really pays attention to that full funnel. You can't just focus on what would be more performance marketing, which is where you're, the paid media, where you're converting users into customers. You can't really just focus on the mid funnel, which is where a lot of like social media, influencer, some of those more engagement nurturing channels, really focus. And you can't just focus on like, some of the brand plays, affinity plays with like display advertising, programmatic buys, and things of that nature. So it's really why I love it so much, is it's tying it all together and this really complex puzzle of sorts that to really nurture and nurse users down that funnel to become brand advocates at the end of the day is what your goal is.
So tell us about some of the tactics you deploy for nurture. And before we actually go in there, I want to just frame for the listener or the viewer. Tell us about some of your products. Like when people are buying Wilton brands, what are they buying?
Sure. So we have two like main, I would say, categories of product. One of them is on the consumable side. So anything from like frosting to sprinkles to anything you'd use to decorate cakes, cupcakes, anything you can think of that a lot of the diehard bakers, like to work with. And then we have durables, which is more the bakeware, right? The more classic, just durable type bakeware, whether it's glass or metal. And those two things obviously work together, right? When people are creating, if you get a chance, if you haven't already, definitely go to, our Instagram and Facebook pages. You can see some of the stuff that, our advocates are churning out. It's pretty impressive. And that's really, I'd say, the foundation of our strategy is building that community and a sustainable pattern of growth for the brand.
Yeah. And so tell us about nurture. And the reason I bring that up specifically, and just for a frame of reference, my background is 100% in paid media.
Okay.
Programmatic, real-time bidding, algorithmic decisioning. That's all we do day in and
Gotcha.
day out, right? So my favorite business term is programmatic, and I'm
Yep.
probably one of the few people who likes that word. I know it's going away though. But nurture, we've recently expanded just minimally our capabilities to also help really small businesses with kind of like what you're talking about from the perspective of nurturing. So the idea of nurture, I'm still getting used to that frame of reference, because right, paid media, you can do scale,
Yep.
programmatic and scale. So tell us, I want to learn more about what nurture means to you and how it's integrated into your business.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a great question. I think it's to properly nurture and scale, you have to look at inbound and outbound. Outbound being paid, inbound being more education or content focused marketing. And at Wilton, we do both. I've really helped build both the last 3 years, but nurturing is a combination, I would say, of both channels smartly being employed. So on the inbound side, it might be more smart, like email segmentation, right? Where you have someone that signs up for your email list and you're engaging with them based on their behaviors and based on their interactions with your brand. On the paid side, it might be more like remarketing, which is probably what you're more familiar with, right? And staying in front of them smartly at the right frequency, at the right times, with the right creative and messaging. And you kind of, at Wilton, we combine those two things and really just present the brand in a very smart way with the right content on trend and the right media, ideally, at the right time. And that's really how we build that sustainable, that path to purchase. I don't think you can really do one or the other, really. I think if you want to retain and build that, I'm sure you've heard of customer lifetime value, build that customer lifetime value, I think a brand needs to invest in both.
So is it really about being in front of the consumer on a consistent but not annoying basis?
Yeah, I'd say it's being relevant.
Yeah.
It's staying relevant, right? And relevancy isn't annoying. Right? If you're relevant, it's meaningful and helpful. And if the frequency is too high or the content isn't the right fit, you hear another term that you're hearing around a lot these days is personalization. And that's another, I would say, buzzword that's been kind of, I don't want to say blown out of proportion because it is important, but what does that mean, right? What does personalization mean for a brand? And part of it really starts with the audience and understanding your audience on an intimate level and the content you serve. The activation levers, whether they're inbound or outbound, are more tactical, right? And that's more timing. So it's really doing what I always say is putting your lab coat on, doing the homework, and really understanding your audience so you can be relevant. And at the end of the day, I really believe passionately that good marketing is helpful, right? It's not noise, it's helpful, and it's in service of not just the brand, but in service of your audience.
That's really cool. Do you think, trying to think about where to go with this. There's so many places, right? So with your content, are you doing a combination of creating your own content and working with influencers and guiding the influencers on the journey? Like, is it kind of like an even split on what you do with that? Or do you kind of like focus more on content, internal content development or influencer content development?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a balance of the two. I think you really at the end of the day, our goal at Wilton is I would say a combination of accessibility and really just being, again, that relevant piece to our users. So, but what does accessibility mean? Well, it means the content that's served up helps them with where they are in their journey as they develop as a baker or decorator. And whether that's leverage, the blessing at Wilton is we have a huge creative team of like 20 to 30 people in-house design, in-house video, and it's really a content factory. One of the responsibilities beyond the distribution of that content for the digital team and digital media team is to kind of form a closed circle and feed the data back to that team to make the content smart, right? And that's a key piece here. And one of the capabilities we've built at Wilton, over the last 3 years is social, or I'd say online listening, not just social, but online listening, and really being responsive to trend, because trends come and go. Trends don't last a month or even a week. Sometimes they last a day, right? So when the trend, and COVID we could have a whole discussion around COVID alone, but how has that changed the online user? How has that changed the Wilton customer? How has that changed everything from their search intent, right? Meaning what search terms are they looking for, to what they might be shopping for, to their interests and what inspires them. So it's really, I like to say, keeping an ear to the rail, and listening to position that whole content, our brand and creative teams for success, right? And data, a combination of first and third party data is how you get there, right? And you get that through listening. And your wheelhouse, you get that through paid media performance too, right? Like what's working, what's not, what has the highest return on ad spend, what's getting the click-through rates. It's the same on both sides of the house there, but it's really just making sure you're staying really relevant to the audience.
So I want to touch on 2 points. We'll touch on return on ad spend secondly, but first, I imagine you've had to develop, your creative folks have become much more agile in the way that they create content, right?
Yeah, they've had to, especially with COVID. Our team has understandably been hamstrung because they haven't been able to be in-house. They haven't been at their studio. So you'll see a lot of our content over the last couple months has been shot at home. It's been shot with mobile phones. It's been what's considered lo-fi. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but lo-fi video is really, I would say, the last couple of years, huge brands like media brands like BuzzFeed have done a lot of that type of work.
What is
effectively, and it's really how they've built their media empire, is off a more accessible, authentic type, approachable type of video where mistakes are made in the video, like right now, for example, like live type streams, and that's okay. It's okay to not be perfect, and it's okay because none of us as human beings are, right? And I think that's a key piece here, and it's scary for some brand teams to cross that bridge and to talk them over the bridge and say, and the way you do it is through data. And you say, here's video in testing. Here's video A, here's video B. This one was more polished and I would say more traditional. This one was done by the social media team with their cell phone.
Right.
Here's the data.
Here's the click-through rate.
Whatever it is, or impression reach, depending on the channel it's distributed on, because that's a big push for us, for the brand, because we haven't done a lot of advertising historically. A lot of people don't know about Wilton, especially on the consumable side. We're not in the big channels like grocery as much. We're more in craft and more in mass, and pretty big, obviously direct and through Amazon. But that's part of my mission, is to get this brand out in a very mindful, smart, efficient, especially as far as paid media goes, where you have to invest. You don't want to double down on a bad investment. So just making sure you do it really smartly and pace it smartly so it supports the products. That's one of the challenges with COVID right now too. It's not just the front end, meaning what does your creative look like? The timing, the pacing, just how everything works together. It's the back end, because there's been so much demand. Especially for our product, with COVID, that can we even fulfill, which is a good problem to have. It's better than having too much. You can't, inventory burning a hole in your pocket. But so that's a whole nother, I'd say, factor in the equation is like, okay, well, I could sell it through the roof right now, but can we fulfill it? What's the user experience like? Right. Which is king. User experience is king. Right. And what kind of user experience are we creating? And that's where I think that the brands that understand that separate themselves a whole nother league from the brands that don't.
So you're saying, I could have sworn I've purchased Wilton products at the local growth. Like I'm in Los Angeles. I think you're in Illinois. You're in Chicago, close.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, we're based out of Chicago, so we're worldwide, right? This is a worldwide brand, largely focused in North America, especially the U.S. We're in grocery, but not compared to our largest consumable, competitors. Betty Crocker, Pillsbury, they own that aisle, right? And so that's where you get that offline brand exposure. People see it, right, every week, over and over and over again, and they see it for 100 years. Even it's passed down through generations, and I think that's where I like to say Wilton was kind of like the original inbound marketer, because the founders, Wilton himself was an educator, and he was out there teaching people the Wilton Method, and that's how this brand was built, like bootstrapped that way. And it was built, I would say, even for the majority of the last 90 years that way, with that mentality of like scrappy, instruction focused. That's where the Wilton Method comes from, right? Instruction focused, passive marketing or inbound marketing, right? We've had to shift, channels like YouTube have come up. You're as familiar with it as anyone, and the how-tos are out there. You know what I mean? One way or the other. And you have to find a way to shift the model away from they'll come to us no matter what to we can still continue that. They'll come to us and we'll inspire them, but we have scale. You have to pay to play.
Yeah.
Speaking your language, right? You have to scale quickly, because I could build organic all day, and that's the foundation of the house at Wilton. But to scale, you have to invest in advertising, because your competitors are doing it. And if you're not, you're losing.
Yeah, I mean the challenge, and when we talk about paid media versus social media, one of the key things we talk about is the imprecision of social media. You spend a lot of time and effort, for example, Ja Rule totally made some random Greek restaurant in Los Angeles go viral with millions of views of a video he did, but who cares if you're not within a 5-mile radius of that restaurant? So I'm in the Valley. I don't know how familiar you are with LA, but let me just tell you, in a non-COVID world, where there's regular traffic, going to the west side from the Valley is geographically undesirable. It's really difficult to do. You kind of have to psych yourself up over it. But this restaurant in West LA near Santa Monica, I really would have to make a big effort just to go down there, and I'm 10 miles away, right? So you really have to be within a 2 to 5 mile radius to take advantage of that. But it makes good notoriety. It's a good case study. Whereas with paid media, I was recently, we were talking on the last episode, we talked to the folks at Cosmic Crisp. Fascinating, which I'm gonna, at the time of this recording, for those of us watching, it hasn't been aired yet, but it'll air. Fascinating. These are people who manufacture apples and they're branding apples. It's the most fascinating thing I'd never heard of. You can brand an apple.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not either or, you know what I mean? It's, again, that full funnel, you really, to build sustainability is the key word here, right? To send the right users to your website, or the right customers, potential customers offline to the store, requires dozens of touch points across. I think the average family household now has 10 to 13 devices. 5 years ago, it was 3 to 5, you know what I mean? And how do you, as a brand, how do you position yourself to stay smartly in front of those folks? And what channels, again, being consumer centric, what channels are they engaging on? You know what I mean? That goes back to kind of coming full circle here to the earlier part of the discussion about understanding your audience. Yeah. Wilton has over 5 million highly engaged eyes on social media. So it is a substantial audience that's been built almost entirely by organic efforts.
And it's a passion business, right?
It is, absolutely. It's emotional. Yeah, it's emotional and traditional, and it's definitely emotionally charged, right? People have fond memories of their mother and father and grandparents, and it's passed down through generations. And especially with a brand like Wilton with 90 years experience in this country, very, very impactful there. But it's still, the competitors, and this is where you start talking about marketing mixes and things of that nature, which I know you're familiar with. You can't even focus just on what you're doing. you have to listen to your competitors, and you have to, especially if you're talking about media at scale, you have to, it's not just, it's what your competitors are doing or not doing. It's the industry. It's things like tariffs. You know, if you're a manufacturer, it's all of these things firing together in a way that, and all of these things that need to be considered when you're building out a digital marketing plan, right? Especially if you're omni-channel like Wilton is, where we have D2C business, and we have a business on Amazon, and we have a business on Walmart.com. We have business offline and just about everywhere you can go for the most part.
Question for you. John, what's your most interesting, like what's interesting for you? Like, is it, you know, a marketing efforts that you're doing, or partnerships with Walmart or Amazon? Is it a specific type of marketing? Like, what gets you excited?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things do. I think I'm a big data guy, and we haven't really talked about analytics, but predictive modeling. Exciting for me. It might be too technical or geeky for you or your audience, but
let's talk about that. I want to learn.
Yeah. So it's leveraging artificial intelligence and algorithms to help make smart business and marketing decisions, right? I would say that's a very simplified way of looking at it, but how do we do the magic we do? It's art and a science, you know, right? But how do we support human capabilities with machine learning, which is the technical term, right? Machine learning, to create, again, that ideal user experience. So for example, personalization, right? Let's say you're a new user to Wilton.com. You come in through a search ad, right? And that's how you first hear about us, non-branded, right? Because you never heard about Wilton. Land on the website, you know, you check it out. Oh, this is cool. You know, I'll consider it in my next purchase or whatever. Then you leave, right? And then you see us on Amazon, right? And you leave there, and then you come back and you follow us on social, and then you sign up for our email list, and then you're nurtured like we were talking about, right? Especially with those two channels. Well, all of that data lives in different places. You know what I mean? The stuff, the paid media data lives in AdWords or Google. A lot of it gets pulled into Google Analytics, but if you're talking about like the root place of where it lives, social media stuff lives in 10 to 12 different platforms, depending on the channel. I mean, you're familiar with all this, right?
And it's a wall. You can't get the log file data.
Yep. So what you try to do as a digital marketer, I'd say just a business person at this point, if you're on top of it, is get that all into one place, right? And it's called a data lake. And we've built a pretty significant data lake with like 2 billion lines of code, last I checked. Just digital data, by the way. That's not point of sale or channel or anything. And we take that and we put it through a rigorous process focused around business questions. Meaning, if I were to come to you and say, what are your top 5 business questions or maybe business challenges you have? And then you take that and pose it and look at the data that you have available and say, how can we answer the questions? Right. And you do that not just with a bunch of Excel spreadsheets, which most people can't consume or don't want to, but you take it and you visualize it in an impactful way so they can then do something with it. Right. Actionable data is the keyword here, right? You can't build that predictive model to effect without having an actionable takeaway. So you pull all of that information in, and it could be, you know, for our product team, how do we innovate here? Like, what are the blind spots, right? And we could take keyword data from searches and search volume from, you know, from Google Trend long-term. And you can look at, you know, we use SEMrush for SEO to kind of pull in all of our searches and get an idea of volume. And that speaks to what people are asking for or what they need, right? And then you pull in more first-party data from your website, meaning what are people doing on your website? You pull in paid media clicks, right? Because that's a signal. And then you put it all together.
It's a very not so robust signal.
Yeah.
Like, but my recommendation, I mean, not that you're asking for it, but like I immediately think of the trade desk. I'd rather if you have access to the trade desk, you can pull in log file data for all your paid media. Yeah.
So, I mean, it depends. I mean, there are lots of homegrown models. We personally use Domo, which is a converged data platform to pull it all together. and visualize it. It's actually been really impactful, not just for our digital team, but we've informed our product development strategy. We've informed obviously our creative. We've informed our brand marketing team. So it's not, this discussion is founded in digital, but this is about the enterprise and the strength of the enterprise and taking that data, whether it's paid, owned, or earned, because we could probably have an hour-long conversation on each one of those media channels, but and putting it together in a way that can be consumed by that business owner. So like the brand team will have very different questions than the creative team, and the exec team will have very different questions than those teams that are more maybe tactical, right? So it's really, I think business really is about understanding your audience, understanding your kind of doing regular SWOT analysis, understanding your challenges and your strengths and opportunities and your competition, and what questions come out of that, meaning what are your blind spots, and then how do you solve for it with data, right? Because it's out there, and a lot of it doesn't even, you don't even need to pay to play to get it. Like anyone can run Google Trends, it's free. What key and that all, so how do you get at that, and how is it relevant to you? Well, what are your personas or your segments of users that if you don't know, you got homework to do. What are the keywords associated with their needs, right? What's the volume, meaning what drives the priority? And that's how you start to build a very smart strategy around digital data, right? That volume, what your audience is telling you with their searches.
Is there anything that you can share about an insight that came across, that something that's publicly available that you can talk about? You can say, okay, look, we did this analysis either on social or paid or something, and you know what, it was a red alarm, not in a bad way, but it was just like blatantly in front of us once we visualized the data. It was very obvious that X, Y, and Z happened. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of more recent stuff that just kind of came to mind immediately is just like staying hyper elastic and agile with COVID, and every business right now that's relevant to us, especially if you're omni-channel and you have an e-commerce channel, right? It's so important to understand on or off your channels what people are talking about and what they're searching for. And, we basically railroaded our entire content strategy when this thing came up, which is a big lift, and focused more on, I'd say, if you go to our Instagram channel, you'll see a lot of it, historically is more like high-end decorating, and I would say Insta-worthy, right?
Sure.
But we pivoted away from that. We went straight back to the roots of like baking and bread baking. There was like this renaissance of bread baking during COVID. It's still here, right? And you nod your head probably because you probably know a few people that just picked up baking as a hobby, or they took it to the next level where they wanted to do more with it. And that moving that huge, a 20 to 30 to 40 person team and shifting that direction, using data as the influence, the mechanism to show that this is what we need to do, and having it be a pretty resounding success was kind of, I think, one of the more relevant, I think, especially to what's going on right now to the market, kind of takeaways we had is it's really forced organizations and even forced our organization to become a lot more agile.
When you look at return on ad spend, are you looking at, if you're selling on Amazon and Walmart, you can definitely track return on ad spend because it's a closed loop there. When you mentioned return on ad spend, what was that what you were referring to? Because immediately I thought, okay, well, how do you track return on ad spend when you're selling something in store? Like it becomes a little more.
Yeah, no. That's much tougher. I think there are two brands that have that, maybe three at scale, and you mentioned two of them.
Yeah.
It's Amazon, Walmart, and maybe Target. Right. I think that have, I've had lots of discussions with people at Target about, on their data team, and they have that because it takes such an enormous marketing technology investment to connect all those systems, we're not even talking about the front end or what it looks like or the user experience. We're talking about just systems that talk to each other. And, also what's their competitive advantage? Well, it's their first party data. That's how they can leverage, their clients to buy advertising is because they have that data that no one else can get. So I think, this is a whole nother part of the discussion potentially today is GDPR and CCPA and data privacy and how that is going to just forcing I would say a tectonic shift
Yeah.
in everything we all do as marketers. And it's the right path to take. It's the ethical path to take, meaning like what's best for the user. But to your point, like third-party cookies, and it's just this whole shift. And arguably it could be good or bad for Walmart.com and Amazon. But brands are being forced, especially CPG brands, where we have to work through the Walmarts and the Targets of the world so far as offline goes. We need that first party data. Yeah. I think there's a shift. I've done some reading recently with reports published by like Merkle and some pretty big players in the industry. And all the brands are scrambling right now to build out marketing tech stacks and a larger D2C or direct to consumer e-commerce environment that allow them to capture that data for themselves. And it's not just about return, it's about learning about your audience. And I can't get any of those metrics on Amazon or Walmart. They're black box for the most part, as you know, especially Amazon, but I can get anything and everything for it's of course anonymous, but anything so far as like behavior and affinities and everything when they come to Wilton.com. Right. And that then again, to your point, the full circle makes the whole enterprise smarter. So I think you're going to see there's going to be a lot of brands, and they already have been that with COVID, because they've had to build out e-com if they didn't have it, that are shifting in this way to get data is going to be, if it isn't already, even more so going to be the new gold. First party owned data is going to be a competitive advantage.
One of our clients is selling 80s DVDs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if there's a niche market for it, and they can turn it and they can make a profit, they have the
craziest thing.
Yeah. So I think you've seen a lot of with COVID, you've seen a lot of restaurants. To your point, I think you even mentioned restaurants earlier. Well, you don't want to drive for it. Well, there's Grubhub and there's Uber Eats, and they've all, even if they don't build out their own first party solution, they've had to pivot. They've had to evolve really quickly to partner with a middleman if they don't do it directly themselves at scale, because people aren't necessarily, depending on the state you live in, coming in, right? So I think that's another example of this evolution. And the question remains: what's the quote unquote new normal coming out of this? It's almost like a sociology experiment. Do users rebel against this isolation in e-commerce and go back to the store in throngs because they're tired of being cooped up, or do they really double down on e-commerce and realize that, oh my God, this saves me so much time. I didn't realize it until I was forced to try it. And I don't know about you, time is my most precious resource these days. So there could be an e-commerce renaissance, maybe it's both. Maybe there's this boom where people are like, maybe we have one of the biggest holiday seasons ever because people just want to be with their families and they want to celebrate at scale because they've been cooped up and they haven't been able to see them. So it's going to be, I think we're going to see, it's going to be really interesting to observe in the back half of this year.
What are you on that note, what are you preparing for the next 6 months or 12 months for Wilton?
Well, great question. Well, we're definitely shoring up the back end, meaning, our demand. I could build the best digital marketing strategy and all the tactics to support it, but if we can't fulfill the orders, so that connectivity, I think all businesses need to be really focused on the connectivity between the front and the back end, meaning sales, marketing, logistics, IT, all of it working together, inventory, demand management, all of that stuff. Because if the data and the performance isn't being shared, or underperformance isn't being shared, then that could be a potential huge pitfall, right? So I think that piece, remaining, it'll be really interesting to see what marketing goes out the back half this year too, because we're planning to stay very, very focused on trend. We already were, but almost scrapping our evergreen like campaigns and just saying, what is today telling us? And it's a little crazy to think that way, but that's almost how you have to be, because, and we haven't even talked about like BLM or any of the other movements, it's, you have to just be listening with such empathy and such high intent, and ready to take action in a smart way, because the brands that don't, are getting roasted, and whether it's performance or whether it's politics or whatever it is, right? I think that listening component is here to stay. And, the brands that can build it out, if they don't have it, are the ones that are going to win, because they're going to stand out. They're going to look more compassionate. They're going to be more relevant to their audience. Everything will just perform better. Efficiencies will be found, and the brands that don't and stay stuck in their ways, will falter. So it's going to be, holiday will be fascinating this year.
What's an effective way to listen, right? Because you either have tools or you have your gut.
Yeah. I'm always everyone says, marketing is art and science, and it is. I tend to lean very heavily on the science, but I'm a design guy too. And I understand you could have a great marketing strategy. If you don't have good design, it will fail. It will, period. Right. So it's a combination of those two things. But I would say, and look, there's social listening platforms out there, and some of them cost more than others. You can do, what's that?
Can you name some?
Sure. Well, the one we use is Talkwalker. It's more enterprise grade. But there are platforms for free that just allow you to watch trends. Google Trends I keep bringing up because it's a platform I think that's underutilized. Google Search Console for seeing what's coming in and out of your website as far as like keywords, impressions, what's really getting the reach, right? The inbound reach. This is not paid. And you can leverage a lot of different Google tools, Google Analytics, like understand your audience, understand their affinities before you make, direct media buys. Do contextual buys that make sense for your audience, right? Which is speaking, your language. I think it's really tying it all together. But Talkwalker has been a game changer for our brand. It's like table stakes for us at this point because it informs not just digital. It manages, it watches brand sentiment. It does competitive analysis and tracking. It really listens. It's a third-party piece, effective third-party piece that listens off our platforms, right? And it's kind of the extension of everything we do on wilton.com and what we own, our own properties, but it listens to the new online news, the blogs, anything that's really relative to our brand. That's where people are typing in Wilton really, or our competitors. And we use that and ingest that and inform our strategy with it.
Amazing. We covered a lot of ground. This is really cool. I think we're going to wrap it up because I want to be respectful of your time. This is fantastic.
Sure.
Sean Foote, Director of Digital Marketing at Wilton Brands. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.